This is the New Tech, New Business Opportunities panel, and certainly that title takes on new meaning in a time that we're all facing right now, where there is a plethora of new technologies being piloted and experimented to address the unprecedented circumstances we all find ourselves in, as well as a myriad of new business opportunities that are being redefined, new business models, new ways of working, all transforming legacy organizations into new post-COVID reality organizations. By way of introduction, my name is Kevin Boland. I'm a partner here at KPMG. I'm based in the Boston office. I lead our market intelligence and strategic investments group. We founded this about 6 years ago to really get ahead of new disruptive trends in the marketplace that were transforming our clients' businesses as well as our own, and ensure that we're maintaining a leading edge perspective and point of view on that. And I'm joined today by two very esteemed panelists, Robert Wiedemann, who is the EVP and General Manager of Nuance Enterprise at Nuance, and Joe Byron, who is the CTO of IoT at PTC. For those of you who expected to see Steve Dertine from PTC joining us, unfortunately he got called away due to an emergency overnight and was able to quickly tap Joe in. So we're really thankful that Joe was able to join us on very short notice today. But Robert and Joe, maybe you just want to spend a minute introducing yourselves and your companies and your roles. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to just share some new personal technology you've adopted during the whole COVID pandemic at home. So, Robert, maybe would you mind going first?
Sure, I'd love to. And Kevin, thank you, and thanks to KPMG for inviting me and for the group to join us today. It should be a good conversation. So, I actually started as a software engineer in 1984, before AI, in 3D graphics and virtual reality. Joined Nuance in 2001, which was very early in speech recognition and conversational AI space. Managed the Dragon business, including Dragon Medical and Professional. And then since 2012, I've headed up the enterprise intelligent customer engagement business for Nuance. From a tech adopted, this might sound boring, but masks, a digital oxygen sensor, a thermometer, digital thermometer, a treadmill, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom. So I think that might be on everybody's list.
Yeah, I think that's been everybody's in their shopping cart in the last 6 months. We've all adopted those types of things. That's great.
Yep.
Joe, how about yourself?
Yeah, and also thank you for letting me here replace Steve Dertine here. I'll try to keep the hopes up. I did, in fact, work with Steve very closely over the last 6 years. I joined PTC about 6 years ago. And my background before that was actually quite similar to Robert's. Computer science background, spent 20 plus years as a software engineer and architect. And I found myself in the Internet of Things early industry in the mid 2000s, which was fairly early, in fact, before Internet of Things was coined as a term. But it was the idea of using connectivity and data analytics to help product manufacturers service their equipment remotely. And that's been a story that we've seen mature over the last 14 years from my direct experience. And these days at PTC, I head up our IoT software business. And, and I'm a general manager of that business as well as the CTO of the IoT technology strategy at PTC. So, of course, very similar to Robert, I'm sure, heavy adopter of technology. Most of the technologies that I've been using more often these last 8 or 9 months have been the ones that are about digital collaboration. So Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all of that stuff. In the non-work space, I've spent a lot of time using digital music recording technology and sharing those recordings with musicians on other parts of the planet and sharing files and remixing and sending them back. Nothing new before the pandemic, but I think as a musician as well as a technologist, something that really the doors got busted open on because we can't get in person anymore and we can't play live. So this is something. So I think what we found is people are finding the digital tools they had to collaborate remotely being far more important. And I think that they're going to be taken to the next level because of that.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the circumstance we find ourselves in is causing people to step outside their comfort zone, discover things that may have already been out there for quite some time, but never really had a role or fit in the circumstance of their life going forward. But as that circumstance has changed radically, they're now finding new opportunities. So it's really exciting to see all those different technologies and collaboration vehicles coming together. I think back when this was beginning and offices were closing, the panic had set in. People were reacting to that kind of a model, and I think we've now discovered that there are new norms and behaviors that are sticking with us, and certainly something I'd like to touch on during our conversation today. As we flow through it, it's just what do you see as kind of a temporary shift where people are adopting something new and different because of the circumstance, and what of these do we think are going to be more permanent over time? So that's an area we'll definitely want to explore. Robert, maybe you could just go, given your long tenure at Nuance, maybe just spend a little bit of time describing, first of all, kind of what Nuance is today, but then also kind of how it's evolved over your 20-year history there. What's been introduced, what maybe was a surprise to you on that time frame, or maybe something you wish you had seen sooner in the process.
Sure. So today, Nuance is a $1.5 billion revenue company focused in vertical AI solutions, really around automating through conversational AI, engagement AI, and security AI, and maybe getting to kind of where we came from and kind of what are we doing today. So when we started in 2001. Our vision, and even was in our business plan, was to duplicate Star Trek's ship computer. So we believed that using speech recognition, NLU, dialogue systems, that we could create kind of question-answer capabilities that would make it easier for people to use devices, to engage with applications, to improve the way they work and the way they live. And so that started with understanding what people say and type. That also required that the system be able to talk back to the person, text-to-speech, human synthesized speech, identify them by the sound of their voice biometrics, and then be able to understand what they mean through NLU and have a conversation with them with dialogue. And so that is the foundational elements of what has now become conversational AI and kind of where we are today. And so we started with how can we do that for consumers? So dictation systems like Dragon. How can we help doctors automate documentation of a patient encounter? And then how can we provide automated customer service? That evolved into virtual assistants around 2011. Our involvement with a very well-known iPhone company, a mobile phone company, and then today where we are is that's evolved into, for us and I think for the industry, not Star Trek ship computer, but Iron Man's Jarvis, or even the holodeck doctor on Star Trek Discovery. So a system that is not only has conversational capabilities, but has high conversational IQ in order to do more in not only doing things for people, but also augmenting human intelligence. And so that's where kind of the technology is today. And as we look ahead, if your goal is to mimic human intelligence, it's kind of a very wide field that you can go for. We're very focused on applying that into healthcare, telco, banking, kind of large vertical markets where we can solve both consumer and patient engagement challenges, but also deliver significant business value.
So, Robert, just out of curiosity, when you went down that path with the vision of the Star Trek computer, which I love that story, what kind of time horizon did you think it was going to take, and where are we at relative to that original curve?
Yeah. So we and I have a history of kind of being early. And so there, early on, it didn't work, right? So 2001, if you use Dragon, you had to train the platform for, 8 hours, which meant reading a script. And so it worked well for lawyers that just did a lot of documentation. And so instead of typing, they could just speak at 160 words a minute. And for disabled people or people with disabilities, were a big part of our market. We knew the only way to turn this into a broad-based technology was it has to work. And so we spent a lot of time on, what was then semantic and predictive modeling, to improve the accuracy. And it got quite good by 2008, 2009. And we started growing our market, particularly with Dragon Medical and Dragon Legal. 2011, 2012, we were part of the breakthroughs in partnership with universities in Montreal and in California around neural nets. And that really was the trigger. And then, of course, when Siri came out, it showed how it could become pervasive. And so, we were running towards AI when people were running away from it back in 2001. But it flipped a switch in 2012, 2013.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great backstory, and I know now it's become so pervasive, and we're so accustomed to being able to talk to our devices, we take it for granted. Versus something that was relatively breakthrough just 10 years ago. It's amazing.
Yep.
So, Joe, from your side, kind of what changes have you seen at PTC? I know you're the head of IoT there on the CTO side. That probably didn't even exist, as you said in your opening, as a term, during your tenure when you first started. But, how have you seen things evolve there, and how's that market continuing to be reshaped?
Well, PTC's customer base are primarily product manufacturers, and PTC began its life. Actually, the PTC originally stood for, it's a little bit like KFC now, where there's a history behind it, but it's not the official name, but it was Parametric Technology Corporation. And the parametric was a nod to a technology style called parametric CAD, or parametric computer-aided design. So in the relatively early days of pure 3D CAD software, parametric meant that it was much easier to adjust a digital design of a physical product because it was parameterized with respect to the other components. And that really launched PTC's future. Later, adopting product lifecycle management in PTC's portfolio. So PLM is the activity of managing the bill of materials or the BOM that is the parts and materials for constructing a product. And you can imagine with modern products, automobiles, for example, the configuration management is enormously complex. All the different models and trim styles, etc. So with CAD and PLM, a really great portfolio for digital product definition, right? The physical modeling with the CAD design and the bill of materials management. But when we thought about the product lifecycle management term, we really thought it wasn't comprehensive enough to really live up to that name, because in fact, the lifecycle of a product is beyond the definition by the product manufacturer. It gets manufactured, it gets put into a supply chain, it then gets put into service by our customers. That life cycle then needs to perform maintenance. There's an end of life, decommissioning, etc. So we were looking, and when I say we, I wasn't yet part of the company because I was in a company that was an early trailblazer for IoT. And IoT turns out, at the end of the day, Internet of Things is about connectivity to consumer environment or industrial assets and ambient environment, taking advantage of advancements in sensors and in networking. So we get to sense things that we couldn't sense before. And importantly, we also get to collect those signals from those sensors. And those signals, when we link that to a business process or an operation, can be enormously enlightening. So the early IoT customers were really trying to do basic things. A radiation therapy machine manufacturer whose equipment shows up in cancer treatment facilities. Well, they have a very complex asset, knowing that the asset is properly calibrated, is being used properly by the clinical staff, and proactively monitoring the key indicators of health of the radiation therapy machine was just mission critical. And so the early adopters were just trying to attach remote connectivity so that they can monitor those signals. and later doing more advanced things with analytics and so forth. So PTC identified that we could help our customers in their manufacturing operations and in the service as they service their equipment on behalf of their customers with IoT. The other technology advancement that was happening over the last 5 years is augmented reality, and we were very early in the augmented reality market. It is a bit of buzzword bingo, I mean, we'll admit, but consider, beyond the Pokemon Go game that was all the rage 3 or 4 years ago, augmented reality is the idea of superimposing digital information augmentation to a human on top of the real world view. So I like to liken it to playing a modern video game, a first-person shooter or a massively multiplayer online game where you have a heads-up display as the player. So you see your virtual world, which is a game, but the HUD or heads-up display gives you key information that you need in that moment. Where are my enemies, right? What's my current status? What are things that I should know about that I can't see in the environment display? Well, when you take that into the real world, that's augmented reality. And in the context of real mission critical operations like servicing industrial assets or healthcare assets, performing an operation, ensuring that the human hands that are part of an operation are performing that operation accurately. Now, when you put this picture together with CAD, PLM, IoT, and augmented reality, we can cover the gamut of, and excuse the next buzzword bingo, digital transformation. And that just means applying these advancements in technology towards the challenges of our customers.
No, it's amazing to see the evolution of that. When you were talking about the earliest days of IoT, early on in my career, I was with IBM, and I was a very young marketing lead in the distribution and transportation sector. And we got a chance to go tour the research facilities, and they had this essentially like a cellular device that simply kind of phoned home. Mm-hmm. And he said, this is what it does, this is how it works, this is how it connects. And I said, well, could I attach it to a railroad car? And what it essentially was, we had clients in the railroad industry, which is a little bit of a dirty secret, but they actually don't know where the railroad cars are at any given time. And so the opportunity to attach a device that would phone home and say, hey, here I am, I'm attached to car number 72 or whatever, was really attractive to them. And so you start to see the very earliest stages of kind of that demand statement that was always there, but until the technology can catch up to it and fulfill the need, it remains underserved. So it's amazing to see how that continues to evolve and those new demands get fulfilled. On the, we opened kind of, as I asked you, just a light question about what you personally adopted, but maybe you can share a little bit about what you're seeing your customers adopt and how they're utilizing and pulling your technology forward to solve some of the new challenges they've faced in the last 9 months or so. I don't know, Joe, if you've got any examples of where you've seen PTC getting pulled in new directions to help customers through their challenges.
Well, one great example are a cohort of our customers that, thankfully for them and for the world, already had IoT technology deployed. And that is, and I made mention of the medical and laboratory and life science device manufacturers. So we're very proud that most of the COVID-19 testing equipment manufacturers happen to be our customers. Mm. And as they were responding to the need for worldwide testing, they developed first the reagents. So just a quick, you learn lots of stuff in our industry, right? Quick primer on how laboratory blood tests and serum and saliva and all that stuff works. You take a sample, it's put into a blood spectrum analyzer or a similar machine that applies reagents. The reagents are chemicals that are meant to bring out some characteristics of the virus or the bacteria, the signature of antibodies that you're looking for as part of the test. So when you roll out a new test, like a COVID-19 test, there's a reagent formulation. So these vials of stuff you put into the machine. And there's also a digital program that tells the machine how to blend the reagents and apply them and look for the signals for the particular test that you're performing. So just as the lockdown's happening, so our customers and their customers sitting at home with only critical staff in the clinics, how do you roll out the new test? Well, you put the reagent sample kits in the mail, and you remotely reprogram the testing machines. So we were able to help them, just apply the technology they had already rolled out and just turn that up to 11. I mean, tenfold increase in the way that they were utilizing the technology, as their service technicians are now locked down at home, remotely diagnosing, recalibrating, reconfiguring this mission critical machinery. And now that example, other industries are looking at what has happened this year and the impact of a locked down workforce for critical service and maintenance activities. And now the remote service and remote management use cases that are unlocked by IoT, which were made perfect sense last year, are now fully, we have to implement this now.
Yeah, no, very thankful that you were able to support those clients, and as they've been working to support all of us. And, it does call into question, what would have happened if we'd had this same pandemic, 20 years ago, without the infrastructure, without the connectivity, without the ability to adopt these new solutions, how much slower would our response have been, or how much more crippling would the economy have been in that circumstance? Robert, how about you? How are you seeing clients kind of utilize your capabilities to respond to these circumstances?
Yeah, so I think all companies had benefits and challenges that came from this. We were uniquely positioned just because $1 billion of our business comes from healthcare, largely selling AI solutions into applications used by doctors and nurses, so what we call care providers, and then on the contact center side, the customer engagement side, clearly, that impacted them as well. From a healthcare perspective, so as a company, we've moved to cloud native some time ago. And so in both of those cases, healthcare and customer engagement, you saw an acceleration of benefit of customers that had already deployed our systems around AI, around digital transformation, and around cloud delivery. And so in the healthcare setting, our Dragon product allows a doctor to dictate a patient note after they've been helping a patient. You guys have all experienced this. You go see the doctor, they ask you, how you're feeling, they take your temperature. There's a whole standardized process to that. After you leave, they actually dictate a note that includes their assessment of what you have and then what the treatment plan is. That takes time. And in fact, it takes a lot of time for the doctor after you leave their office. So the Dragon product really accelerated Dragon Medical One, our cloud solution, in terms of allowing doctors to save time in documenting what was going on with all patients, but particularly COVID patients, allowing them more time to spend with the patient as opposed to the documentation behind it. And that's just accelerated, and is accelerated both in terms of existing customers, existing hospitals expanding use, but new hospitals coming online to take advantage of it. On the contact center side of things, immediately they just had an amazing impact. Many of them have centralized contact centers where literally 5,000 people go to work every day into the same building, and they answer phones. And so our systems automate that process. If you've ever used, you called into an 800 number and spoken to the system. If it works, it was our system. If it wasn't, it was our competitors. But those systems are deployed. We do virtual assistants in digital channels that then escalate to a human if it needs the help. So in the first, in the March period, when things really started to hit and offices were shut down, we moved thousands. For one customer, we moved 5,000 contact center agents from a centralized contact center set of buildings to work from home. And because that customer had deployed our solutions already on the web, that happened in 3 days. They also had 1,500 retail, this was a telco, 1,500 retail salespeople that normally were at, your brick and mortar store, also go to work from home so they could keep the sales side of their staff helping and drive revenue. And so those types of things happened at every single brand that was out there. And so it's accelerated, again, AI, digital, cloud transformation initiatives, and it's accelerated a belief that automated systems should be a priority. And so the one big trend that's happening across all industries is that digital transformation initiatives, which have been going on for 20 years, right, are being augmented by AI transformation initiatives and a much more focus on how can we automate more of what humans do. And then, and so in our systems, you can talk to a VA that automates for the consumer. If it does escalate to a human, whether that's through voice or chat, we have AI that's called Agent Coach that will pop up recommended answers to the agent, so that the time it takes for them to service, what's called agent handling time, is significantly reduced, like by 40% or more. And so for sure, we will not go back to companies that say, hey, we will just use low-cost agents overseas. That's how we'll reduce our cost of service. Much more now applying, like many of the leading brands have done for a long time, applying this technology, applying the investment, the money they spend on agents towards automated technologies that reduce the need for humans and actually deliver a better result.
So I was actually going to ask this question a little bit later on, but I think it's apt to ask it now because you both kind of hinted at it in your answers in the last conversation. But, which of these adoptions or behaviors do you think are going to stay with us, right? So even as the news of a vaccine rolls out, and we're all very optimistic about that, some of these behaviors that we've gotten accustomed to, they're going to stay because they're either better, they're cheaper, they're more effective, whatever the circumstance might have been that we've now learned through this. So just curious if you were to look out and say, which of these behaviors do you think are going to have staying power for the long term post this COVID crisis, and which or temporary? Any thoughts? I don't know who wants to go first on that one.
Well, I think it comes back to business and economic value. So for us, IoT and augmented reality translates to business value for our customers and by way of manufacturing efficiency. So truly increasing the bottom line by enhanced efficiency, less downtime in the factory, better worker productivity with augmented reality, expert training, addressing the aging workforce problem with these technologies. And on the remote service, of which the COVID-19 testing example, it's reduced cost of service and better uptime for mission critical assets. Like, who doesn't want more of that? So I think that the technologies have been applied towards these use cases. So it's not about adopting the technology. It's about adopting completed solutions, which we have and Nuance has, that happen to leverage these technologies. But companies like Nuance and PTC have learned through lots of hard work how to capitalize on the technical innovations from academia, from science and engineering, and apply those to business use cases. Those aren't flash in the pan ideas. These are not unicorn Silicon Valley startup ideas, which no disrespect to those, but I don't think we need yet another chat client for our phones. What we do need is improved ways, as Nuance and PTC are doing, in harnessing AI and machine learning technology towards focused use cases, not with a, gee, this technology can do everything, it's going to be fully intelligent. Let's not debate that yes or no. Let's find out how we can train a machine learning model that can detect and predict failure on a rotating piece of equipment really well. Let's train the heck out of that AI and then apply it towards mission critical use cases where the value is clear. So I think, again, it's an exercise of taking advantage of some technical innovations of the last 10 years, higher density compute, better CCDs on digital cameras, better memory in equipment and better, cheaper storage, better networking. These advancements have unlocked the AI and connectivity and data processing opportunities, and those opportunities have unlocked the use cases.
So kind of a combination of a trajectory that was already happening, a step change curve in the adoption path, and then an acceleration of the slope there on the back end now that we've gotten more accepting of these capabilities and finding new opportunities to apply them. That's a great view.
How to practically apply them is the key.
Yeah, I love that. Robert, how about you? What's your thoughts on which of these behaviors are going to stick with us?
Well, in the worlds that we provide solutions for, there are dramatic shifts that have happened in 9 months that would have otherwise probably taken another 3 to 5 years to happen, and it's not going to go back. So, and I'll start with just customer examples, and then I'll talk about the technology as quickly as I can. But so we used to dial. I'm old enough to know what a dial looks like on a phone that you dial.
I had one of those too. You're not alone.
Me too.
And I haven't made a landline phone call in years. I've used my smartphone. In the last 4 months, I've made Teams phone calls 1,000 times more frequently than I'm using the actual, dial a phone number, the feature of my smartphone. So what that's done is it's moved voice out of the telco switch era, and it's moved voice into the digital channel. Those phone calls, this voice video that we're encountering now, is going over the same channel as if you browse your web page. And that's a fundamental shift in traffic towards things that can then be used to benefit from digital AI. So, for example, prior to COVID, we were working on a solution for ambient intelligence for Dragon. So, Dragon Ambient Experience DAX. And the goal was we were going to put a box on the wall of the hospital, and it would listen, and had a whole bunch of sophisticated technology in it. And it could listen to the doctor, listen to the patient, identify them by their voice print, automatically capture what the patient is saying, what the doctor is saying, put it up on a wall that you could see, have an AI intelligence turn that into a recommended treatment plan that the doctor would sign off and go. We've now delivered that in partnership with Microsoft on Teams because telehealth is going to be here forever, and it's going to be huge. And the number of times that you go into a hospital to see a doctor is going to be reduced by 80%. And because those things are the engagement between the patient and the doctor are via this type of engagement. We've implemented for Zoom and other things as well. This offers the opportunity to bring AI more into the engagement. And so this concept of intelligent engagement, Jarvis, if you will, is benefiting because we automatically document. We pop up to the doctor. Hey, you haven't, the person's complaining of a joint pain in the elbow. You haven't recommended an MRI. 99.9% of all other patient engagements that have this recommend an MRI. Do you want to recommend an MRI? On the customer service side of things, it's the same thing. Like a VA that is the brain for Wells Fargo that connects to the mobile app, the phone calls that come in however they come in, that connects to an agent desktop environment that uses agent AI. All of those things, very soon you're going to be texting to a virtual assistant online or on your phone. It's going to escalate to a human. The human's going to try to help. And then the human's going to say, hey, can I just talk to you? Right? Move from text. And just like that, with this same technology here, WebRTC, be able to talk to the person and or even see the person to solve their problem. And all the while, ambient intelligence for the agent in this case, instead of the doctor, saying 99.9% of the time, based on this conversation that you're having, this answer solves the problem for the customer and you haven't offered it yet. Maybe you should do that. And so everything's going to be digital. Everything's going to be have some element of AI automating it, and it's going to be better. It's going to be better for us as consumers and patients, and it's going to be better for the enterprise because it's going to cost them less to deliver high levels of service.
So, I mean, it's fascinating when you talk about this and how seamlessly it's going to get woven in and provide another different definition of augmented reality for people, right? Is you'll have these ambient intelligent beings looking over your shoulder, providing expert advice and perspective along the way, which is incredible to think that that's here and now and not, science fiction. So exciting to see where that could lead. But I'd be curious to get both of your perspectives. And Robert, maybe we just pull on the ambient intelligent one for a second. Like, how does that come about inside Nuance? Like, where did that idea germinate? How do you think through the prioritization of it, the funding, the development of it, the piloting? Like, what are the procedures by which that concept comes to life to become an offering that's now changing the world?
So we have the benefit. So first of all, we're forward-looking. I mean, we actually are pretty aggressive at anticipating what the market will need, and we kind of ascribe to Steve Jobs' approach, which is, you can learn from your customers, but oftentimes you got to show your customers what they needed to solve the problem that they have. And we're not a startup. We're a $1.5 billion AI company, literal AI company, and really on the forefront of that, of conversational AI especially. And we have a lot of customers. Basically every hospital in the United States uses Nuance. Every large telco uses Nuance. You call Delta, and they know why you're calling. That's our predictive engine that's adapting their engagement with you based on why you're calling. And so we are very close to our customers and what their challenges are, measuring how well our systems are delivering value to them and value to their end customers, whether they're patients or consumers. But also then us coming in and saying, and this was, we built DAX well before, we believed e-health, telehealth would take off. But we knew the challenge was, how do you get all the information between a conversation and a patient and a doctor in order to then apply AI technologies to make that patient engagement, that patient encounter better? And so DAX was, the direct result of us working with our customers, and we have executive customer councils that we work with, and we have a formal innovation group. And so we have long-term partnerships with, Fidelity, for example, their innovation group and our innovation group, with healthcare systems in Pennsylvania that are, collaborative innovation. Our agent coach came out of a partnership with USAA Bank, and identifying the problem and running experiments and turning that into a real solution. So we're very aggressive, and we have to be. I mean, we compete with Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And guess what? We're growing, and we've got more share in the vertical markets that we participate in than all three of those players. And it's only by being very aggressive in staying close to the problems, close to the customer, and being just, at the core an innovative company that is hungry to solve problems.
No, I think that's great. Before my time at KPMG, I was actually a partner at Clay Christensen's firm. Clay is the godfather of the term disruptive innovation and the innovator's dilemma. And he talked about, kind of people aren't buying a drill, they're buying the means to create a hole. If you understand that the end need is there, drills right now are the easiest way to create a hole. But the goal is to create a hole. And if someone comes along with a better way or easier way or cheaper way to create a hole, they're going to win that marketplace. We've been putting holes in things since the dawn of man. Sticks rubbed against the shell made a hole, and then we put a bit on the tip of the stick, and it drilled faster. And then we rifled the tip a bit and it drilled faster. And then we put a motor on it and it drilled faster. And then we took a battery and put that on it and it made it more portable. And 1,000 years from now, we're still going to be putting holes in things. but we're probably not going to be using the same drill I just bought it at, Lowe's. So, the needs are out there. We just have to continue to discover the best ways to serve them, and those who can get more precise in those answers, I think, are the winners. That's great. That's a great story to tell.
Yep.
Hey, Joe, how about from your side? Like, how does a concept become a reality for the PTC systems?
Yeah, for PTC, we're sort of fortunate that many of our product managers and engineers, in fact, our CEO himself, are not only technologists, but they're also practitioners in the industries that we serve. So our general manager of our CAD business was a Creo user. I have folks on my IoT product management team who are manufacturing engineers. And so now they deeply understand the challenges that have been ever present in those industries. And we look for, as I was describing earlier, the technology innovations that are being unlocked at the lower layers of, think of like the solution stack, fundamental enabling technologies like cloud, high density storage and compute, GPUs, et cetera. And we have a blend of folks who look for the technology innovations, going as far as including myself, as I was part of the office of the CTO, scouring through academic research papers, what's the latest approaches to applying neural networks and Bayesian networks to machine learning for the purposes of predictive maintenance on industrial assets, right? So we take those learnings, which are fairly arcane, but we map those against the understanding of our customers' challenges. And with, several customer visits per PTC product manager per week, we're constantly inundated and scooping up, what's on our customers' mind, what would they like to do next? And to Robert's point, who's making Steve Jobs' point, we need to sort of blend the art of the possible with going a little bit ahead of our skis, right? We're not quite sure. For example, in the early days of IoT and augmented reality for PTC, we had a hypothesis that these advancements in computer vision and CCDs, now manifest as augmented reality, could be useful for maintenance, operational performance, and quality inspection in manufacturing. Well, how did we test that hypothesis? We built some prototypes, and then we talked to some friendly customers who were willing to come along for the ride with us, a co-innovation activity. And that's really been part of our culture now. We have co-innovation activities happening today in our IoT business, in our CAD business, PLM, and we have product managers and our software engineers embedded in factories and embedded in our customers' teams, proving out new concepts that will have a path to a productized solution from us in the near future. And to be sure, some of those experiments don't go as planned or as hoped. Some of those hypothesis-driven prototypes fail. And we're happy to see those failures because it means we're not going to waste our customers' time. And I know one of your questions is probably going to be some examples. I can't help to give an example now of, what was a buzzword 2 years ago and everyone thought you need to have a strategy for blockchain. So I gave it the real college try. I really did. And, my team, we went deep into the technology. We crawled all through the open source implementations. We studied every use case. It's interesting, but the application of that technology advancement towards the real business challenges that our customers have, just not seeing it. It might be there, but it's an example of one that we just sort of parked on the side, right? Let's not forget, the idea of a digital ledger, which manifests as blockchain and is using cryptocurrencies. Interesting technical idea, still on the lookout for a practical application. Mm-hmm. But that's part of our culture now, looking for things and being quite ruthless in what we take forward to a customer.
No, it's a great point. We've done something similar at KPMG where we kind of have a foresight team that's out there doing signal sensing and scanning, much as you both talked about, connecting with academics and others around kind of what are the new ideas that are being incubated from a technology and business model standpoint. Then we do a short sprint to review some of the more interesting ones that look like they've matured to a point where they might be relevant, and we try and get a sense of where we're going to see demand, because we obviously serve clients in a wide number of verticals, as you all do. And so we have to understand, the adoption curve in energy might be very different in the adoption curve in automotive or financial, and where we're going to see the traction early on and what are the leading indicators of that. And then we'll do a seed study where we bring in, to your point, the client co-experimentation opportunities, because a lot of times this is dependent on a client's environment, the data that they have, et cetera. And the clients want to learn about this space as much as we do. So they're going to come down that learning path, a little bit unclear on what the outcome might be at the time, but they said, we'll benefit from being first to market if it's great. We'll adopt it first and we'll get benefits from it. At a minimum, we'll have people on our team now who are familiar with it and have learned about it and how to share it. And if it doesn't pan out, we'll at least understand how not to go much further down that path until certain conditions and criteria change over time. And that's proven to be a great accelerant for us and for our clients. By doing that and opening kind of that kimono of experimentation and bringing them in, the learning path for both of us is accelerated, which is fantastic. Mari, I noticed we have about 10 minutes left. Should we see if I haven't seen anybody raise their hands, but I wasn't able to see the whole list of participants throughout the discussion. I hope I didn't miss anybody, but you may want to open it up for a formal Q&A here for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen anyone raise their hands, but again, for anyone listening, if you have a question, there is a hand icon next to your name in the participant list. You can click on that and we will call on you. Also, but if you have a question now and would like to unmute and just ask the panelists, you please feel free to do so.
I'll jump in with a question. There was talk about how everything's sort of being pushed to fiber and whatnot. Is there anything sort of being, since the bandwidth on copper is being freed up, is there anything that you guys see being pushed back down to copper to utilize that space, or do you think it'll just sort of be left to oxidize and then be picked up by scrappers?
Well, I can provide our view. 5G is going to change everything. It's not only going to change where you have to go sell your surplus copper, but where you're going to have to sell your surplus fiber. It'll take a while. It'll take a while for that to happen. But we're a company called Rakuten. You might have seen their TV ads. They're a 10 billion e-commerce company and digital bank company. They've launched a 5G service in Japan that's really disruptive, that has virtualized a full 5G communication stack into a cloud-native environment that can then be distributed to the edge through these really small cell towers. And they're adding, conversational AI, engagement AI, security AI from us to that. But right now, the rollout in the States is probably a couple of years behind other countries that are actually doing it better. But I think 5G is going to be the transport. Rakuten's coming out with a IoT device, speaking of IoT, that will become a 5G hub for your home that'll replace your Comcast subscription, your Comcast cable into the home. So at least from our view, wireless communications is going to dominate as 5G matures.
It's a really interesting question. I agree with what Robert just said. I don't know what we'll do with all of that buried copper, but as a very interesting example, if you all recall, some time ago, we all switched to high definition television. And so that freed up spectrum that was previously used for over-the-air television. That spectrum, which is primarily low frequency waves, so-called sub-gigahertz frequency, means less than 1 gigahertz of a wavelength. That frequency band turns out to be very interesting for sensors that are buried under concrete or earth or flesh. So for use cases like tracking a linear asset or sensing a linear asset like a buried pipeline, putting a sensor 12 feet deep in the earth, you can't get your smartphone won't work down there, but a sub-gigahertz radio can. And also it turns out that because of the lower frequency, it uses far less power, which means the batteries can last for decades. So I don't know what we'll do with the copper, but I'm really excited about the ways we've decided to reuse the opened up frequency spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think about, one disruption in a certain sector causing an opportunity that creates a headway for an opportunity for another area to be totally disrupted in a different path. Because if that transformation hadn't happened in TVs, that bandwidth wouldn't be available. We have to be solving the sensor needs with a different solution.
Exactly.
Yep. It is also interesting. I agree with all the perspectives that were shared here. I mean, we're essentially going to become walking pings, where we will be consuming and broadcasting data 24/7 through all the different devices we'll have on us, through sensors embedded in a bunch of dumb devices today. And the world will continue to transform and kind of be bent to our will along the way. Or the reverse side, we get bent to its will, through subtle manipulations and prods we didn't even realize we were getting at the time. So it'll be a very interesting world because we're building, for those old enough to remember the movie, we're kind of building the matrix around ourselves. We are placing ourselves into the data matrix, whether we like it or not, with how much we're sharing and consuming all the time.
Yeah, choose your own adventure, utopia or dystopia.
Yeah, depending on which movie you watch and what your interpretation of
Star Trek or Blade Runner.
Yeah. So I know we're coming up on the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of our panelists' time and everyone else who's joined, but Joe, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to prep for this discussion and joining us today and sharing your views on kind of the state we're in and where we're all headed going forward. Very exciting to hear what PTC and Nuance have been doing about this space and the processes and systems you have in place to continue to capitalize on it going forward.